What is the graphics? Setup.
Subscribe to Simply Bitcoin.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome in. This is the Meme Factory podcast. You've made it to test stream number 68. Anybody who watches this show knows that we'll never have anything other than a test stream. That way we can't get canceled. If it's a test, oh well. This evening we're joined by Joe Consorti. Joe, if you could take a moment and introduce yourself to the audience, that'd be fantastic.
Absolutely. Well, thanks guys for having me. It's a blast. I've been a fan of the show for quite some time. I tune in from time to time. You always put on a really good one. So happy to be here. My name is Joe. I am a recent graduate from the University of Vermont. And currently I am working under Nick Bhatia, the author of that book back there, Layered Money, as a research assistant at the Bitcoin Layer. The Bitcoin Layer is a research provider. We cover Bitcoin through a global macro lens on Substack, on YouTube, and of course on Twitter. So that's what I'm all about. That's what I do. And excited to be here today.
We're excited to have you, man. Since you've watched the show before, you are aware the way that we make our revenue as a show is that our sponsors require the guests to read the ad copy. So if you do us a favor and reach into your DMs, I've sent you the ad copy. Just pull it up, and then you can rip right through that at your convenience whenever you're ready.
Of course, absolutely. I will read it with the utmost level of seriousness. All right, here we go. Wow, this is long. All right. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Consorti, and this episode of the Meme Factory podcast is brought to you by Suscorp's brand new product, Bodybuilder Liquidity Lube. But wait, Joe, you might be asking, why would bodybuilders need a Bitcoin lube? Well, I'm glad you asked. Today's bodybuilding lubricants lack the benefits of modern technology. Suscorp is addressing a grave deficit in available liquidity of all types in the Bitcoin space. And this is one market segment that seemed to fit us like a snug prophylactic. Suscorp engineers developed a product manufactured from our patented and proprietary canola/soybean oil mix. Don't lube in the past. If you're a bodybuilder lacking in liquidity, then you can swarm down your body with military-grade machine moisturizer before putting yourself on display. Suscorp's Bodybuilder Liquidity Lube leverages our patented proof-of-work dispenser. Simply enjoy a firm, consistent stroking pattern to the applicator until you reach the correct value to dispense your silky discharge. But don't cream yourself alone. With peer-to-peer lubricant application, you can get to know your fellow competitors before you ever get on stage. No one is in charge of Bodybuilder Liquidity Lube. It is completely decentralized. One day, it just showed up, and now more and more people are using it. Big Lube is trying to stop us, but they can't do anything. No one can stop Bodybuilder Liquidity Lube. No one.
Nice. That was great.
Joe, you did a great job.
Phenomenal.
A
future employer is going to take that right out of context. I could already see.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's
we exist for that purpose.
That's the reason for it. And this is the part of the show where we thank our actual sponsor, Coinbits. Thank you. If you plan on DCAing at all and buying Bitcoin, Coinbits is the way to do it. Small spreads and Bitcoin only. Now, we usually take a sandwich order at this point in time, but our sandwich person isn't here. I don't know what to do about that other than ask you, what's your favorite sandwich, Joe?
My favorite sandwich? Oh, my gosh. A chicken parm, I have to say, a chicken parm. My last name wouldn't be Consorti if my favorite sandwich wasn't an Italian staple.
Okay.
Chicken parm, you taste so good.
Yes. That was Eli Manning, right? Or Peyton Manning?
Yeah.
That's a classic.
I did not know that one. So, Joe, you're 21, as your Twitter profile says.
Yes.
What kind of skill set did you bring to the table that led Nick to hire you?
Right. Absolutely none whatsoever. There was on the back of like a box of Krispy Kreme donuts, there was a scratch off to win thing. And I won. No, but in all seriousness,
Congratulations.
oh, thank you. Yeah, it was real luck of the draw. But in all seriousness, basically, I throughout most of college, I had been competing in business case competitions, and so I was given sort of a prompt revolving around a business scenario, and I was asked to solve it and present my case for it. And within that period, during my freshman year, I really started to fall in love with the nitty gritty of markets, and reading books in my free time, doing research, watching YouTube videos, and also at the school library, we had access to Bloomberg terminals, and so I.
What school did you go to where you had Bloomberg terminals, Joe?
Vermont.
The University
Vermont.
of Vermont. Yeah, come on now.
Wow.
But yeah, no, I really developed a love for markets and really reading into them and trying to figure out how this whole machine works that we live within. And it wasn't until we got sent home for COVID that I really figured out what Bitcoin was. Obviously, I had heard about it, but I didn't develop an interest in it until my buddy Tyler, who works at Bitcoin Magazine, sent me over two articles. One by Breedlove, The Masters and Slaves of Money, and the other, The Bullish Case for Bitcoin, obviously by Vijay Boyapati. And I read both of those. I really enjoyed them. And I had already, again, as I mentioned, developed an enjoyment for markets, one of my pastimes that didn't involve going to the gym and lifting, was reading books and perusing the Bloomberg terminal and things like that. And so I saw over the course of 2020 and 2021, we got sent home for COVID, obviously, which sucked. It was really silly. It was really stupid. I developed a really heightened level of skepticism towards authority during my freshman year, my sophomore year. That probably helped in my journey into Bitcoin and just generally developing a disdain for central authority, which obviously the Federal Reserve fits right there. And I ran two small businesses over the 2 summers that I was in school. My freshman year, I ran a painting business and general contracting business, and we did 6 figures in revenue, like $101,000. Then the following year, I did the same thing because I figured I put so much work into the first year. I got this big network of clientele. I have this acumen about how to run a business. Why not do it again? So I did, and I ran $250,000 this time, and I ran a much larger business. I expanded it all across Massachusetts, all the way down the Cape and things like that. And then came time right around the spring, December, winter/spring of 2021 into 2022, so last year. And to this point, right, I had been studying markets for 3 or 4 years now. I had been like a year and a half, almost 2 years into learning about Bitcoin, and I had a few choices to make. I could either try to find a job in markets research and writing about markets, which is what I really, really love doing, or I could do another year of this painting business. And I figured, I could do the painting business. I could, double my revenue again. That's awesome. But at the end of the day, it's not really, moving closer to what I wanted to do in the long run. And so I chose the former, right? I chose to figure out a way to find a job within markets research, that would really allow me to do my thing and do what I was enjoying. And I saw what Dylan was doing, Dylan LeClaire. He went to the same school as myself, and he had basically used Twitter as like a living resume. So publishing what he was looking at, what he was enjoying, publishing his work, and that's how he found his position. And so I figured I'd follow that same path of using Twitter as my living resume to publish my research, and just really use it to try and get a job underneath somebody. Again, markets are my passion. Bitcoin is my passion. And so I'd been doing that since January of 2022, December 2021, January 2022, basically publishing markets research, just general analysis, implications of markets and Bitcoin. And I flew myself out to Bitcoin Miami last year to try to get, try to do networking and things like that. I came back, and then basically every single week, I had started in late March. Every Saturday, I published an 8 or 9 tweet thread really quick, It was called This Week in Bitcoin Data, and it was just a really quick, snappy rundown of all the relevant stuff that happened in Bitcoin and markets over that week. And lo and behold, Nick Bhatia found it, I think, week 4 or 5 that I was doing it. So I got quite lucky there. Nick reached out to me, I think via LinkedIn DM or Twitter DM. We got to talking, and the rest is history. Nick started the Bitcoin Layer sort of as his own, research publication that he was doing just on his own in September of 2021. And since then, he's brought me on board. We've brought a designer on board, an Eclipse creator on board, and now we're really expanding it out into a full-blown markets research publication. Now we do 3 Substack pieces a week. I'm obviously extremely active on Twitter. We also have a growing YouTube content set as well and a YouTube audience. And that's essentially my story, start to finish, how I got into markets, how Nick found me, and how I got to the Bitcoin Layer.
That was a long answer for your skill set, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
And that was impressive, man. That I was like, okay, that's how you do it in the quarantine. That's how you pivot the business. That was awesome.
Yeah, that was the idea. I mean, like, it was either I take the time that I've been forced into my home to do Zoom classes, 3 hours away. I'm paying for room and board that I'm not allowed to go back to. I could go get a job at Dunkin' Donuts right down the road. I'd done that throughout all high school. I worked at Dunkin' Donuts and learned how to pour coffee into a cup better. Or I could go take this risk. I could go knock on doors in the freezing cold, during March in Massachusetts.
Can we back it up just a second? Because you touched on something that is near and dear to my heart, and that's coffee.
Yes, absolutely.
You said you learned how to pour a coffee cup better.
Yes.
Enlighten us. What's the Dunkin' Donuts method?
The Dunkin' Donuts method? Well, first things first, you want to fill your cup full of ice before you put the coffee in it. Obviously, you don't want to splat, because if you
talking about iced coffee?
Yes.
Oh,
it's strange in Massachusetts, even if it is, it was -50 outside last week, -50 degrees.
We got
You'll still go out and get iced coffee.
A lot of Europeans here.
Oh yes. Well. For context, last week it was the coldest week I think on record in the Northeast. It was crazy, and even during those times, people will go out, they'll get iced coffee at Dunks, not hot coffee. Right now, I'm drinking hot coffee, black hot coffee. Really, the only way to do it. We'll see if we can get a close up there. That's spilling it all over the place, but gorgeous. It's in a mug that I got at BitBlock Boom, and yes, pouring coffee into a cup better. That's what you learn to do when you're at. Now it's out of focus. When you work at Dunkin' Donuts. There we go.
There you go.
Yes, indeed.
So, dude, the
only reason I'm letting you talk about coffee is because your last name is Consorti. That's the only way. Maybe you have to do something with an Italian heritage there. Like, that's the only reason I'm letting you talk until now about coffee.
Precisely, yes. Well, it'll Yellow. It will please you to know that as an Italian, we use in this household perhaps the least Italian way of preparing coffee, which is not an espresso machine. It is a Keurig machine. It is a Keurig.
Damn. Yes. Why?
So I'm brewing my coffee through plastic, and then I'm drinking all of those phytoestrogens as we speak. So I apologize, Yellow. Very, very sorry.
Does those estrogens help in bulking or something?
Yes. I need to balance it out from all the testosterone that I'm getting.
Yeah. And
I'm here in Colombia, and there's a guy, Bitcoiner. He's doing Lightning coffee, the Bitcoiner's coffee. Check it out.
I've seen that. I've gotten some DMs about that. That's dope.
Yeah, it's good coffee.
We all love markets.
So you kind of answered also my question I had. I always wonder why, I feel like people that enter in the Bitcoin space are people that their environment are really fucked up and they really get it, from that. But there are also people that they have to basically go through a little bit the job market, get slapped once and twice by the clown world shit, and then really get Bitcoin and enter. But I'm always wondered by people like you that enter very early, and you answered that perfectly. So next.
So what happened to your painting business? That's my question.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, at the end of the day, it was really easy to disassemble, because it basically, I was hiring friends, and the reason I was hiring friends was because it's much easier to teach people that know and respect you how to paint than teaching people who know how to paint, that have been painting for 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, how to respect a kid, right? I was, 19, 18, 19 at the time that I was doing this. And so hiring friends who just want to earn money, who already respect you, and teaching them how to paint, right? That was the easiest way to do it. And I had great employees because of it. I had no attrition my first year, which I'm very, very happy about. Nobody quit. The following year, different story. I was running many teams. It was a lot more difficult to manage. I'm happy I did it, but it was nice because everyone was a college student that I was working with, for liability reasons, as well as at the end of the summer, it was really easy to disassemble. So the painting businesses no longer exist, because at the end of the summer, everyone just went back to school.
No more. You didn't have like the Winklevi twins take over for you or something?
Unfortunately, not. No. But one thing I can say is that all of the clothes that I use for painting, I still have, and those are my gym clothes. I don't buy low time preference. I don't buy. I haven't purchased new gym clothes in ages, except for a couple of stringers that I got for myself as a Christmas present. The gym clothes that I use now are still covered in layers and layers and layers of paint from over the last 3 years.
Yeah, it's a big.
If you looked at the spots on each of the clothes, I could tell you what house we painted with it.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
dude, I
Dylan
have
Leclerc.
a markets question for you.
Yeah, hit him with a markets question.
So,
Yes.
yeah, markets. So, the jobs report recently came out, and it's looking amazing. And then CPI is coming out, right, in a little bit. But the BLI just changed the CPI metrics. And I heard, and I'm not sure if this is true or not, but I've heard that the jobs report metrics have also changed. I just want to know, like, is that true? Have both of these metrics been changed? And what are your thoughts on how to look at these numbers compared to past numbers if these things have been changed, like the methods of looking at them?
Right. That's a great question. So the CPI, the way that the CPI is calculated, that changes pretty frequently. Whether or not that actually distorts the final number that we get to like a really tremendous degree is another story. I personally don't think it does. To like a degree that it's a totally different number. It's likely within striking distance. But over time, these things are altered, and also over time, the labor report is altered, right? When it comes to the way that non-farm payrolls are calculated, as well as the way that the ADP report is calculated. So both of those labor reports are the ones that get released. ADP employment gets released every week, and non-farm payrolls gets released every month. Excuse me. And non-farm payrolls, the methodology, I do not believe it changed. ADP employment is probably another story. I think it underwent a change at the start of this year, if I'm not mistaken. But any way you slice it, and I was actually just talking to Joe Carlasari earlier today. He's all over Twitter. He's really great. I respect his takes. And we were talking that the labor report was obviously extremely robust. A lot of it boiled down to the seasonal adjustment, which happens every year. So every year we get a similar headline to the one that we just got, which was massive labor report beat, right? The ADP projection was, I believe, 128,000, like 300,000, 309,000 on the upper end was the high end for estimates for jobs added in January. And we blew past that to 518,000, I believe. 518,000 jobs were added in January. So 5 times the median analyst projection. And perhaps analysts were caught off guard because there's been this expectation moving around markets, particularly throughout most of 2022, that the Fed was going to imminently over tighten, and we were going to see the effects of a slowdown like that. Like we were going to see a credit event, we were going to see labor market deterioration. But the economy is in the labor market have proven much more robust than, for posterity's sake, I will say, much more robust than I gave it credit for and I anticipated, and much more robust than the majority of analysts anticipated. I think a lot of what has happened when it comes to the market being more robust than we expect, the labor market and the real economy are not showing, they're showing signs of contraction, but also what we've seen with this last week of data, the week before this one, with the surprise in ADP employment, and also ISM services. Services managers surveyed tremendously well. It was so good, it was in economic expansion territory levels of well. A lot of this likely boils down to the impact of the excess liquidity still in the system after 2021 and 2022. During 2022, in March, we obviously underwent the most aggressive tightening campaign. And most analyst estimates were this is policy error. You don't have the ability to do this. And on FinTwit, that was basically consensus. The Fed is committing policy error. There's going to be an imminent credit event, imminent labor market unwind. It's all ending. But it seems like the excess liquidity within the system, from the fiscal standpoint for consumers, as well as whatever ended up on company balance sheets via extreme QE, but also fiscal stimulus, through the various
PPP loans and everything,
things of that sort. It seems like that cushioned a lot of the blow from the extremely aggressive hiking. And so it seems, and I hate to give the Fed or Jerome Powell any sort of credit whatsoever, and that's not what I'm doing, but it seems that all of their aggressive hiking has been met on the other side with a labor market that can take it, real businesses that can take it, and individuals that can take it. And the reason I say this is because the labor market is yet to materially unwind. We're still adding jobs. Although all the headlines are about unemployment, that unemployment is getting really quickly reabsorbed back into the labor market through what we just saw in January, right? Over 500,000 jobs added in the month of January alone. And so the labor market is still extremely tight. It can weather this aggressive hiking because of its excess balance sheet capacity on these within these businesses, within financials as well. And on the consumer level, there was a report out by Goldman Sachs about excess pandemic stimulus. And it turns out that consumers have only spent 1/3 of their stimulus from the pandemic, right? The excess cash that came into their possession from the pandemic. And so despite extremely high inflation, and then the most aggressive hiking campaign we've ever experienced as a country to try to ameliorate that high inflation, consumers are still doing fine, right? From the standpoint of having excess cash and savings. Obviously, inflation is ravaging households. Businesses are doing fine, and thus nothing really is unwound yet, right? Borrowing is going fine. Financial markets are running smoothly. Banks are still creating loans to consumers and between one another and to businesses. And so there hasn't been this big blow up yet that was being anticipated throughout most of 2022 and 2023. Now, that's not to say we're re-entering expansion. And it's also not to say that it's not going to happen. Fragility is increasing, right? Obviously.
It always happens in February and March, right?
What always happens in February and March?
The big crashes.
Not to my knowledge, potentially, who knows, but not to my knowledge. In 2008, that certainly wasn't the case. But
was an outlier.
All right, it seems like this excess liquidity has cushioned a lot of the blow from the really, really aggressive tightening. The labor market is yet to unwind. Obviously, the fragility of markets, the likelihood of these things occurring increases through time as the Fed stays tight and gets tighter. Credit will begin to slow. Conditions will begin to contract further. But as of right now, it seems like there is, for lack of a better term, I suppose, there's still air to be squeezed out, which is ultimately what the Fed wants to do. They want to slow credit down to a halt as best as they can. They want to make sure that consumer spending can't rear its head back. They want to make sure that the labor market loosens. All in the name of inflation fighting. And this is, it's a dirty institution. I'm not a fan of what they do. But thus far, they've seemed to have done it relatively well. Now, to answer your question, Sean, in an extremely roundabout way, yes, the calculations for these things changes. I don't necessarily think that it's it could be malicious to some degree, but I don't think it alters it alters what we were going to see anyway. If anything, you know, fractions of a fraction of a percent fluctuations in the final value. Then again, all these calculations are arbitrary. They're nonsensical. They can never capture with accuracy what is actually occurring in the real economy. You know, the BLS is sort of a sham of an institution. Data collection at the governmental level has never been very good. But as of right now, the real economy is sort of in a state of chop, right? It's digesting these rate hikes. As of right now, it's doing okay. But as the year chugs on, we'll see how that shakes out.
Joe, I'm curious what you think the impact on the labor market might be from just demographics and not just strong companies, because you're looking at right now. I think we're at the peak of the baby boomers retiring, and you've got a lot of millennials and Gen Zers either entering the workforce or delayed entering the workforce. Essentially filling the roles of the largest generation. How much of that can be pushed onto this labor number?
Right. So demographics are an issue here in the United States. And that ultimately, you know, through time, it will naturally make it such that, well, what's bad in the United States now is worse over in China. It's much worse over in Europe. But the reality is, you're right. We are faced with baby boomers exiting the workforce. And so through time, there is the potential for labor shortages. But as of right now, there is still a tremendous amount of supply within the labor market to meet all available demand. And
I guess that's not what I'm asking is, does that show up in the jobs numbers? So when you're adding jobs, is that just millennials and Gen Zers taking jobs of the boomers that are retiring?
Good question. It does break into age brackets, but that's not entirely what it is. Obviously, there is a component of baby boomers retiring and other retirees, other older generations leaving the workforce and younger people stepping in. But on net, that isn't what makes up the majority of the number. A lot of it is just shuffling within the labor force. Not this, where it's more so like you're not going to see one single labor print, or let's say for the next 3 or 4 years, employment data where it's just Gen Z, it's just millennials taking over jobs as baby boomers leave, and so you have reports that seem like more jobs are being added than there really are. It's more so like a gradual trend that you're going to witness over the next decade. It's not necessarily going to be like a report like this that totally astounds us, where in actual fact it's just baby boomers leaving, and so millennials having to come in and carry the load. I feel like if anything, you're going to see that shifts much more subtly, and it probably won't be visible in the headline prints. I think this upside surprise was just a function of the seasonal adjustment.
See, I would have tended to agree with you if it weren't for COVID. I mean, you have a lot of the boomers who either don't want to go into a crowded work environment because they're afraid of negative consequences and externalities from the thing, and I think in this 2-year time period, you've seen an acceleration of what would have happened over the last 10 years now happened in 2. And I don't know. This is just my own potato brain thinking here. So I don't know how much weight you analysts put on that information, but it sounds like a lot of folks aren't taking that into account. I don't really understand why. Hopefully, maybe you were going to shed some light on that for me.
For sure. Yeah, no, that is a factor to play into it. There was a lot of people who were nearing the retirement age who just chosen not to work and chosen sort of to lean back on that pile of excess savings. It's certainly not something that Nick and I focus as much on. We basically, the way that our macro framework works is we take all economic data into account, but we're not necessarily specialists when it comes to labor. We're not necessarily specialists when it comes to manufacturing, or really any specific print in particular. We sort of take it all in aggregate, and we bundle it into sort of economic data. That's sort of the component of our framework that we put it off to. And then we focus, we attack everything with an interest rate focus, how that impacts risk markets. And so that's sort of if you want to analogize it to a watch. I'm not wearing a watch right now, but if you want to analogize it to a watch, basically what we monitor first and foremost are rates on the dial of the watch, and then the face of the watch is risk assets. So what is that doing to Bitcoin? Bitcoin's obviously traded as a risk asset as of right now. What is that doing to equities, right? And then how do what rates are doing, how does that feed into sort of the underlying components of the watch? And that has to do with commodities, economic data, and sort of things of that nature. And so that's really how we approach things. We're not necessarily approaching things with being specialists in any one particular field, apart from interest rates and Bitcoin. Those are the two fields that we really try to take a pretty eagle-eyed approach on, if you will.
Marcus, and I know you got a question, but I had a follow-up if you don't mind me hitting it. Excellent. So the one thing I wanted to take into account here is that I just looked up the stat. Baby boomers account for about 50% of the generational wealth in the U.S. So like you said, as they're deciding maybe they're going to retire on that pile of cash, a lot of that's held in ETF funds, IRAs, 401ks. That's going to be a lot of sell pressure over the next decade or two going into the markets. Do you guys account for that, or is it mainly a focus on the Fed and rates for your macro outlook?
The Fed and rates, it's certainly a factor, right? Baby boomers selling off their sort of immense wealth into markets, but really it isn't too much of a concern in the age of everybody having to become an investor out of necessity. The passive investment flows really dominate and sort of create this sustained bid for all across markets into bonds and equities and things of that sort. And so because like the average person has become a participant in asset markets, and because it's going to continue being the case to an increasing degree, we don't feel that, or I personally don't feel off of this question, that the additional sell pressure put on by the largest holders of generational wealth is going to completely shift the paradigm of markets, such that like we enter a sustained bear market that's longer than a bull market, right? Barring the Great Depression, which was the longest secular bear market that we've had in the United States history. I tend to think that this time and next time and the next cycle, it will vary to the degree of how high we go, how low we go. But I think one thing's for certain for probably the next several decades is that on a decade and multi-decade basis, we're not going to have many bear markets that outlast bull markets. And so I tend to think that even as baby boomers retire, and even as this generation of individuals who are sitting on the largest aggregate amount of wealth out of any demographic in the United States in our history, I don't believe as of right now that's going to change the paradigm of markets, such that it's such immense sell pressure that the free market won't be able to scoop it back up via active investors, portfolio managers, and also passive flows. But it's definitely something to consider, of course, as the next few years chug along.
I'm going to cede the floor to Marcus here.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm really struggling how to formulate this question, right? Because maybe a little background. Like I studied engineering once in a while, a long time ago, and then I also moved to university and I started doing communication science, which is more of a soft science, and a part of that was actually economics. And when I listen to all this stuff, it's and again, I'm super happy that there's such a plethora of people out in this space, attacking Bitcoin from different angles and stuff. But when you talk about, you take into consideration all economic data and look at what the impacts are of different aspects on Bitcoin or in different aspects of the markets. Do you guys do any kind of whether it's a regression analysis or whatever, to see what the actual impact is, or what like the predictive power of this stuff is. Because, and again, it's not, it's an honest question. For me, it just always sounds like reading tea leaves. It's like when I listen to different like macro people in the space explaining stuff, it always seems like they're explaining stuff in hindsight. Like, oh, now the market's doing this, so it's probably because of this and the impact of that. So I'm just wondering, like, what is the do you see it as a science? What's the point of it all?
Right.
Name names, Marcus. Name names.
No, I'm not going to name any names.
No, I think the sentiment Marcus have
But
is
yeah,
just one, because like a lot of plebs have that view about macro guys. Maybe we don't fully understand the science. Maybe we kind of realize through the Bitcoin lenses that the markets are psychology, so they are a little bit of theater, and you guys are like waiting basically to normalize some numbers in the brains of many people in order to those numbers and those normality to be set in order to start the new cycle again. Basically, it's like a chicken. It's like a game of a chicken, and also a little bit of theater, at least to the eyes of a lot of the plebs.
Yellow, you're right, and Marcus, you are right as well. Marcus, to answer your first question, yeah, we do regressions to actually see what the predictive power is of the things that we're looking at, and rates, particularly the suite of U.S. Treasury rates, has, and where they're headed, has the most predictive power, not only on Bitcoin but also asset pricing generally, right? If you think of interest rates as the price of money, the price of borrow, right? We live in a world that revolves around credit, right? And so it's all around how cheaply can I borrow? What is the cost of how I borrow? That influences asset prices. In the case of equities, obviously it influences what forward cash flows will be, right? What you can go out and predict your cash flows to be. But given that, it also sort of helps you predict risk asset pricing that doesn't necessarily have cash flows. And the only obviously asset that falls under that banner is Bitcoin, right? It's traded, as a risk asset despite not having any cash flows. So rates have extreme predictive power when it comes to equities and other risk assets, and Bitcoin is traded like a risk asset. So, we run regressions. We also take a look at cross-asset correlations and see how those change over time. I've been saying Bitcoin trades like a risk asset, and that's because it does, right? We may think that, and I think through time, this reality will eventually come to markets, but for now, it's an informational arbitrage. The eventual reality will be that Bitcoin is sort of this apex risk-off asset. It'll be, during volatility events, this is the thing that you want to own, because obviously you can't create any more Bitcoin. I think I've said this on Joe Burnett's show a few times, but the general idea is that if we live in a world that's totally incumbent on cheap money, and we're so reliant on this, and this is a reality that we believe, then like I want to position myself with the most porous sponge for liquidity that there is. And the most porous sponge for liquidity is not an equity that can be reproduced. It's not a fixed income instrument that can be issued time and time again. It's something that can't be reproduced. It can't be replicated. I can own it. I can verify my own ownership of it. And that's Bitcoin, right? I want to park my wealth there. And so that's the lens through which we view everything. As of right now, the correlation between the S&P 500 and Bitcoin is waning. But cycle after cycle after cycle, it's waning at the margin. I think in 2013, the correlation between the two was 93%. In 2015 or 2016, during that cycle, the correlation dropped to 89%. And it's somewhere in the mid to high 80s right now. But I think the reality is...
you hear that, Samson Mao?
Yeah, come on, Sam. Replay this clip back, tag Samson.
Mm-hmm.
But I think through time and as the liquidity within Bitcoin expands, far and away beyond what it is now, I think eventually you begin to see Bitcoin trade more like a monetary metal, right? More like something you want to own within this, a big volatility event, like what we saw in March of 2020, like what we saw in August of 2008. and things of that nature. And so, we do run regressions. We do every week. We have a free newsletter that goes up on Saturday, and we also do two every during the week that are paid. And cross asset correlations are one of the things that we take a look at most often. And so what we say, we try to we verify always. We don't want to, at the Bitcoin layer, we don't have like a dogmatic narrative that we try to push on people and run with a narrative despite what the market is telling us. We take a markets first approach, right? Whatever the market is telling us, whatever the reality is, we have to bend to what the market is saying and just analyze it objectively. If you go at things dogmatically and you become sensationalist, then oftentimes you're wrong, and wrong in a huge way. And we don't do that at the Bitcoin layer. We completely avoid sensationalism. And to this point, it's worked out for us quite well. I think, Yellow, what you were alluding to, like a lot of macro analysts will simply read tea leaves and they will be sensationalists, and every single one of their tweets will be sovereign default or this or that or the other thing. And it's something that's big, it's something that's scary. But at the end of the day, like, they're wrong. And then they will change their tune, they'll change their fiddle on a dime, they'll never address it again. We try to do the opposite of that at the Bitcoin layer. And to this point, we feel like we've done a pretty okay job at that. But you are absolutely right. Oftentimes, markets people will be very sensationalist. Their track record will be extremely spotty as a result of that, and then they'll just sort of brush it under the rug. We try to take the opposite approach. And sometimes, unfortunately, that approach is very boring, right? Reading markets and then just analyzing them for what they are and providing implications. And I'm trying to become more succinct with that myself. It's more boring more often, but the byproduct of that is that you're providing value. You're providing value more consistently and more of the time, and it's more accurate. And so that's what I try to do. That's what we try to do. And those are some of the tools in our toolkit that we use to get that done.
Yeah, it's not more like it's not that, it's not so much that macro guys and everyone in that sector are not doing their job, are not analyzing data, are not actually doing the science so much. Like it's that the science into that they're doing, like the basic thing they're analyzing, for us at least plebs, it's pretty much a fugazi. It's a fugazi. It's like okay, it is and it isn't.
And you're right. And 99% of it is it's science, right? It's pseudoscience, right? When you're looking at and Sean was talking about this earlier. The BLS, they change their calculation methods
Exactly.
all the time. And so when you are an analyst, you have to make sure that what you're talking about is something that's accurate. It's not some sort of heavily distorted report. And that brings me to some degree back to why we have such a focus on rates. Because they're the pure, even though they're issued by the U.S. Treasury, right? And the government doesn't know how to balance its book, whatever. But rates basically are the proxy for how the world is behaving, because they're the most liquid asset class in the world. And so we have a really narrow focus, and in having a really narrow focus, we have less stuff to say inherently, oftentimes because we're just talking about rates. But at the same time, we're not spending too much time on the BLS report, and we're explaining and talking about the implications of them and what they could mean for markets. But more often than not, the asset classes that we're focusing on are the least manipulated of them all. Number one, Bitcoin, right? Of course, obviously there's a lot of distortion that still occurs in Bitcoin, but less so than other asset classes and U.S. Treasuries, because just analyzing them of themselves, they can provide us the most signal rather than focusing on reports from labor.
As you said, though, I don't know if you agree, but okay, yeah, Bitcoin is manipulated at some point, right? Between the cycles, but it comes to a point like a yellow puppet will predict for a second time at the bottom. And how he does that is, you see hodlers not being able to, they don't want to sell anymore. You see it, right? And the fucking thing is capped. So what is going to happen? It's not a stonk. It's not like a bones. It's not the same. It's a different beast. So I guess I don't know if you're agreeing with that. That's a different beast. It's a different kind of asset. It's very new still to the minds, even to the macro guys that are coming to the space. And at the other side, like we have we have a crisis in the fiat economy, and they're changing the laws. They're changing the game book, and your job, I feel, is like to find that edge, that new kind of thing, that new kind of bearing, to reassess again what the fuck is going to happen. Then the private sector first come and pretty much agree, okay, this is going to happen, and then I feel that the Fed is always playing like a kind of defense and a kind of theater. Oh yeah, we're going to do that, but they're buying time in order for the new conditions to be normalized in people's mind. So it's not the same, I think. I don't know
Maybe it's
if you
different.
agree
Maybe
with
it's
that.
different too, Yellow. Like, Joe, are you aiming at the Bitcoin layer at like plebs, or are you talking to like more institutional kind of audience? Like maybe you could speak to that a little bit, or
Right.
Sure, yeah.
So for sake of trying to not sound like a politician and saying I work for you and I work for you, we come from, and I say we, I'm 21 years old. I do not come from a traditional finance background. Nick comes from a TradFi background, but obviously he dipped. He's now teaching Bitcoin at USC, but he used to work in fixed income. And so basically working with him has been it's been having the best mentor ever. I will say, Nick, if you're watching this, thank you very much. And I tell him this every day. I'm extremely grateful.
Nick watches
He
every week.
watches every show
watches every
religiously.
That's fantastic. Nick has done a tremendous job in really teaching me all about fixed income, sort of the ins and outs of traditional finance in the time that we've had together. What I will say is that the way we write the newsletter is such that we still talk about rates, and we still talk about how important they are, how important the entire suite of U.S. Treasuries is to all of global finance. We're not going to sugarcoat that or walk around it, but we make it accessible to anyone. Right? What Nick tells me is that when we're writing, we should be writing for write my aunt or my uncle who may be subscribed to the newsletter. They're not financial at all. They may be getting up there in age. They still want to know what's going on in markets. And so the topics that we write about are as relevant as we could possibly get. The analysis that we provide is as good as we can possibly develop and as high signal as we could possibly develop, right? In the truest sense of the word, but also we're writing for anybody to be able to read it, writing for anybody to be able to understand it. And so with that in mind, we have doctors that subscribe to us. We have engineers that subscribe to us. People that run...
Yeah, but that's Dr. Jeff.
Oh, Dr. Jeff as well. Yes, we love Dr. Jeff. We write for doctors. We write for engineers. We have people who run large investment firms and large banks that read the Bitcoin layer and they're paid subscribers. But we also have the plebs, right? We're writing for the plebs because at the end of the day, that's what me and Nick are. We're Bitcoin plebs. That's why I bought this big neon sign behind me that says the Bitcoin layer, and I have this sign right now. I have this bookshelf of Bitcoin and markets books. We're really trying to bridge that gap. We're writing for the institutional investor, but at the same time, we're writing for the plebs. We're writing for the layman. We're writing for everyone to be able to read what we have to say, but it's still quality, top tier, premium markets research that you'd be able to find from a JP Morgan, from a Fidelity, from a Goldman Sachs. That's the echelon of research that we've been putting out and that we continuously strive to put out. But we're writing it for the plebs. We're writing it for basically anybody to be able to read.
And you are welcome, sir. As Marcus said, it's good to have a plethora of different people. We cannot all be the same in this space. We have to watch this thing from different aspects and exchange views for sure. Who's next?
I have.
I got a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Do you have a question?
Oh God.
Yes, I do have a question.
Okay.
So, we've talked to a lot of different people about the markets. You study the markets all the time. What's the hardest thing for you?
Why is your background blurry? Are you in the metaverse?
Is that
I
Udi?
got some ding dongs going on back there.
I love to mess with sound. Sorry, I'm gonna stop now.
No, you're not.
So Joe, I was gonna say, what's the hardest thing for you when it comes to studying the markets? Like, what's something that like either you stumble on or that's just kind of like it doesn't make sense. I don't know, something that you find a challenge when you're trying to dig into the markets.
That's a really good question. And the reason I prefaced it by saying that's a really good question is so I could have a few brief moments to stall and think of the answer that I'm going to give you. Um,
The Jack Mahlers.
We're familiar with
does-
this tactic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he did the same thing.
you look directly into the camera. You don't break eye contact, and you say, "That's a great question."
That's a great question.
Several different ways.
Or is nothing, or does everything just come easy to you?
No, I'd say it's the volume of things to look at and the way that you could, because obviously when you fire up the
But that's two different things: volume and visual.
yeah, I mean when you fire up whatever software you use to take a look at markets, when you open a book, when you take a look at everything, I have. I can't count the number of sticky notes. They're organized, but I have lots of sticky notes on my desk with just general concepts that I'm thinking of. In that drawer back there, I have sticky notes from concepts that I've got and I've ingrained up here. But basically, there's such an immense volume of data to take in and to interpret, and you really have to be able to triage it effectively. And oftentimes, for me, I'd say that's a challenge. In the beginning, it was much more of a challenge, but now it is much less of a challenge because I have such a great mentor in Nick to know what to look at and also figure out what's noise. Like, sometimes I'll take a look at an economic piece of economic data that comes out. I'll say, "Oh my God, did you see the Chicago board? Manufacturing survey? It just printed the lowest that it's printed in X, Y." And then we realize, wait a minute, this is barely ever utilized as an economic metric. Nobody looks at it. Nobody cares about it. And I can get that sort of information about what's relevant and what isn't relevant from Nick, right? I will bring up an indicator. I'll bring up some release. I will bring up some piece of data that I found. And Nick will either say, that's substantial. Go write about it. Go read more about it. Or I'll bring something to him or ask his opinion on something. And I'll say, that's a bag full of hot air. That's totally inconsequential. And thankfully through time, I've now developed a list in my brain of things to look at, sort of in order of operations, right? When I fire up the terminal, I have a launch pad of everything that I need to look at in the morning, and it takes me 5 seconds to get my bearings for the day, right? Right up in front of me, I have the entire U.S. Treasury curve, their movements and basis points, and a small squiggly line to show me where they were the previous day and today. And then I can see risk markets, so I can see what credit is doing, I can see what equities are doing on the day, and then right below that, I have foreign exchange, I have central bank liquidity, and that's basically it. So I can take a look at, right as my day starts, I can take a look at what rates are doing. I can take a look at what risk markets are doing, right? If there's anything crazy happening in credit, etc. And then I can take a look at, foreign exchange. That's essentially it. And then, obviously I have other monitors for money markets and things like that.
Can I get your login to that Bloomberg terminal?
He's got more than one. He's got like 3 Bloomberg terminals right at the desk.
It's hidden somewhere in the background. If you pause the video right now, you
can we make like a program that takes all those variables and basically makes a smiley green face if it's good and a red frowning face if it's bad? I just need that as a tweet.
I could turn all of my tweets into that from here on out. I know we just got the character limit unlocked on Twitter, but I could go the complete opposite direction and just start putting a smiley face or a frowny face.
Green smiley face, red frowning face. Yes. That's it.
You need the color coding because the smile and the frown isn't enough to denote it.
Yeah, exactly. You might like to be,
All right, so
you might be emo or some shit. I don't know.
I promised I would get this question out before the end of the night. So this one is for Joe. It's from a gentleman by the name of Marin Frangi. The question is, do you think Bitcoin will fall below $10,000 in the first quarter, like some are saying?
Come on.
I don't know who's saying it, but...
Who's saying it?
I don't know who's saying it. That's just the question.
Someone in the chat room?
The old trick is to say that some people say this, some people said this, not me. But some people think that, but not me. No, I don't think there. Well, no. Ceteris paribus, all else equal. Markets continue heading the way that they're heading. No, That's not to say that
give us a strong answer, Joe.
Did
Don't
you
give us
just did you just give a Harry Potter Cerebus Avada
put
Kedavra?
a
no.
spell on them.
That's just a Latin phrase for all else equal. All else equal. So I'm giving you guys some markets alpha in markets in the circles.
Expecto Patronum.
Expecto Patronum. That's what we say. But no, it just means all else equal. But here's the deal: the way that markets are headed right now, we're basically in a Fed pause rally. Historically, every single time that there has been a Fed pause or a Fed pause is approaching, markets have rallied pretty considerably. Right, bond yields tend to chop around, and then eventually they fall through the floor as treasuries catch a pretty good bid. Obviously, when it comes to bonds, the price of a bond and the yield of a bond are inversely related. And so when we talk about bonds catching a bid, that just means yields falling. Usually, when it comes to a Fed pause rally, risk assets do really well, right? In the months that there is a Fed pause, right? They arrive at a terminal rate and then pause. And bonds tend to do all right as well. The reason, one of the things that is a big part of our framework at the Bitcoin layer is this idea that rates lead the Fed. And what we mean by that is the market for U.S. Treasuries globally is the most liquid market for a single asset class in the world. Right now, it's right around $24 trillion in size. And so we derive a lot of signal from that in the direction that bond yields are headed. In the direction that bond yields are headed, because the market is so deep and so liquid, it can sort of give you a proxy for what the market believes the Fed is going to do, particularly on the front end. So on the front end, the 2-year U.S. Treasury notes is considered the best proxy we have for short-term interest rates set by the Fed, one of which is the federal funds rate. And so I tweet out twos very often. It's a very regular part of our analysis. And basically, it's a proxy for forward Fed funds expectations. And right now, twos have been getting purchased on net so much that the 2-year yield has fallen below the federal funds rate. And generally, when that happens, historically, when that happens, the Fed's hiking campaign is over, more or less. We also see via, obviously, the Fed downshifting at the last 2 meetings from 75 basis point increments to 50 and now 25. That chances are they're putting in the landing gear for eventually stopping their hikes altogether. Also through Fed funds futures, which is basically to simplify it, it's a betting market of sorts for what the federal funds rate is going to be and the path that it's going to take over the next several months. That is also pointing to a Fed pause here in the near future, whether that means late Q1 or sometime during Q2. And so risk assets are really getting out ahead of this Fed pause, and they've rallied quite considerably. Basically, obviously, throughout all of last year, we talked about how rates are the single best determinant for risk asset pricing, particularly for Bitcoin. Rates really, really help us determine what Bitcoin is going to do. And obviously, throughout all of 2022, extremely aggressive increases. We know this. And now that basically, rates are going to stop increasing, it's not as supportive for risk assets as cuts would be, but it is more supportive than aggressive hikes have been. And so that's why risk assets are sort of rallying out in front of a Fed pause, because what comes after a Fed pause? Rate cuts. And obviously rate cuts aren't in the near future by any stretch of the imagination, so long as inflation is as elevated as it is. The labor market has yet to unwind materially, et cetera, et cetera. The Fed wants to see a few more things before they cut. But a pause, risk assets love that. Bitcoin loves that. Chances are over the next several months, bonds maybe potentially stand to chop around a little bit until the reality that rate cuts are coming materializes more fully. And then bonds yields will in all likelihood drop further as the year goes on. But essentially, to answer the viewer question in the most long-winded way possible with that really simple macro setup that I just gave, I don't see many. There aren't many catalysts for Bitcoin to drop, the 50, 60, 70% in the next few months here. Of course, anything can happen. There can be some sort of deflationary impulse in markets, maybe some sort of, credit event occurs, funding, World War III.
So the cyber polygon.
Yes, yes, and any number of things can happen in
Balloons.
markets.
Atlantis rising.
Yes, exactly. That would totally shake up the macro picture.
Reverse of the poles and shit.
Asteroid
Yes,
impact.
yes. Earth's magnetism.
I would
The
simply
SEC
say go
cracking
back
down.
and watch BitBoy videos. Whoever asked that.
Yes. Watch BitBoy. But no, there isn't much of anything in the next few months, barring some sort of deflationary impulse, credit event, or really just unforeseen circumstance in markets. But if the direction that markets are taking right now continues, which is one of a Fed pause coming relatively soon, which has been historically supportive of risk assets, there aren't many impetuses for Bitcoin. I don't know the plural of impetuses. For Bitcoin to take a massive leg down. Chances are it will stay supported and remain supported as long as the Fed pause is coming up, and once the Fed pause.
Yes. We have also a question here in the chat. I don't know who this guy is inside the Zoom call.
I have one more if we have time.
Can I ask that question here from Makalai Consorti Kulkin, whoever you are? He says, sorry guys, my mic is broken. I have a question for my brother. Why Home Alone 2 was not as good as the first one? I think this is Labra.
It's 100% Labra Huddle.
No, this is a real person. I'm pretty sure I've met this guy before. Home Alone 2 is much better than the first one, I will say.
Wow.
No,
that is very controversial.
That is controversial.
I enjoyed Home Alone 2 a lot more. I think Home Alone 1 when you're a kid, when you're a really young child, or probably when you're a parent, it's a much better film to watch for you, right? It's more Christmassy. Well, both films are Christmas movies, I suppose. But I think I just enjoyed what was his name? Kevin McAllister roaming around New York City. I thought that was more entertaining than him, and I'd say it's also probably more watchable than the first one. There's only so many times
I don't even know you anymore, Joe.
You could watch the same kid do the same, set up the exact same pranks on these robbers over and over and over again. I tend to think Home Alone 2 has more rewatchability.
I've never rage quitted a live stream before.
I think it's so controversial as saying Die Hard 2 is better than 1.
Oh my God, it's not that controversial.
I didn't even know that there was a Die Hard 2. So.
There's like 12.
And you brought me right back in.
Good answer.
You reeled me right back in. Thank you.
Oh Lord, there is a Die Hard 2. It got 70 on Rotten Tomatoes. It's not terrible.
There's like 5 Die Hards.
No, you're off by
Die Hard 4. He knows how to fly.
How many times can you die hard? This is unbelievable.
Well, Die Hard.
Oh, Die Hard 5 got 15% on Rotten.
Yeah, it's the one with his son. Then he has a daughter. Then he's like in Bulgaria or some shit.
Yeah, it's like Taken.
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
Anyway.
All right, are we giving out scores tonight? I want to have Rusty's late. Let's have Rusty give out the scores. Rusty, can you talk?
We have the dog here. It's Labra.
He can't talk.
It's 100% Labra Huddle.
His microphone's broken.
Labra.
No way.
Yeah, I can.
He chewed it.
I can talk.
Labra.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Rusty.
Hey, Rusty.
Did you and Joe like send like a memo around about facial hair? It looks like is there like a? Did you coordinate facial hair?
No. You're misunderstood. We need you for the score.
No problems, no questions. I understand. Okay. I haven't listened to anything so far, so I'm just going to have to take a wild guess at how everyone went.
Rusty.
Dude, come on! It's not MTC Bitcoin. Come on.
Greg, you get a space helmet. Yellow, you get a plush toy in the shape of yourself. Joe,
Kinda.
you get. I'm sure you did really well. So you get a big bag of gold coins.
I don't want gold coins. Those things.
No problem.
You're getting them anyway.
All right, man. You shut up and take. Yeah. Sean, you get a new microphone. Pedro, you get an LED
Just one.
garden light.
Just one LED.
Just one. Yeah, one LED garden light. Marcus, I feel like you've been pretty quiet tonight. That's just a guess. You get a pot plant with like a dying Christmas tree. And Macaulay Culkin, you can probably have another bag of cocaine or something as your score.
I love it. All right, so RD's not here. I want to make Pedro do the RD question.
All right, mate. I'm terrible with accents. I can't do this stuff. Let me check my notes here. Okay. All right, hey, Joe. Thanks again for joining us today. This will be the last question of the night, and we'll let you go on about your way. Oh, Greg's shaking his head no.
He's trying.
He's trying.
If the meme factory did exist,
God damn it, there's rules here. Rusty, sorry. Go ahead.
I
can't fight the rules. You know the rules. He raised his hand. What's the question? What do you got, Rusty?
Yeah, no. I know I came late.
No.
Question, and I was like, man, I've got a question. What was, I don't know if you guys have talked about this, but what was better, Meme Factory podcast or Peter McCormack?
I was told that the Meme Factory podcast doesn't exist. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
It's an acceptable answer. It's an acceptable answer.
We were actually getting
this guy does his homework. This guy does.
One thing I will say though about both appearances tonight and on Peter's show is that I should really stop wearing contacts on camera because I'm squinting like Clint Eastwood the entire time because this light in front of my face is so bright. I really need to start wearing glasses when I make public appearances. But that's just
sunglasses on that.
You can see your Bloomberg monitor though.
Sunglasses on a stream or
what Bloomberg? I don't know what you're talking about.
No.
All right, fake RD, go.
All right, here we go. So, if the meme factory did exist, which we all know it doesn't, which one of us would you like? Which one of us would you retweet? And which one of us would you mute?
That's a great question. Oh my God. I just did the Jack Mallers thing again.
You did.
I would.
Great minds.
How about this? I would like Big Sean because, Sean, you oftentimes put out some very prescient and forward-thinking markets takes that I agree with and I like. Your tweet today I particularly liked about all the big layoffs in the headlines. So I would like your tweet. I like tweets that have agreeable take. Greg, I would retweet.
Yes.
Ooh.
Wow.
I think you have some pretty good memes. But you're also tasteful with it.
Thank you.
You're not too.
Wait. Did you
Thank
say
you.
Tasteful?
He did. He said tasteful.
Yeah, I used the word tasteful.
Joe,
it's on the internet forever now, guys. I'm sorry.
Look at Greg's face right now.
Sorry, it's just tasteful.
Wait a second.
Tasteful.
Wait a minute. And what was the third one? So
Are your DMs open, Joe?
And mute.
Yes, my DMs are absolutely.
Okay, so be prepared for some distasteful.
I'm looking forward to it. It was like retweet, and what was the last one?
And mute. You got to mute one of us.
And mutes. Oh man.
Yeah, you fucked
God,
up.
I don't want to mute anybody. Hold on.
You have to. Gun to your head.
Okay. Let's see. Well,
I'll take it.
you know, as much as I adore Rusty's question, because he is muted right now, I'm going to have to mute Rusty.
Yeah,
I think it's
fuck you, Rusty.
fair.
Yeah, fuck you, Rusty.
No, I kind of felt it. I kind of felt that was coming. It's like
You-
been a bit
That's
of a
what she
mute
said.
week for me. Like I've had another person mute me this
Yeah,
week as
fuck
well.
you.
So not sure.
This is why we would mute you,
What's going
Rusty,
on?
because you just keep talking.
I feel it's only fair.
That was great.
All right, Sean, your turn. Do the thing.
Oh man, Joe, you know what's happening in block height 840,000?
It's the El Salvador Bitcoin party. Is that right?
Mhm. That's right, sir. We got the party going on. Whoa, Greg's just moving everywhere.
I don't know. He was talking. Sorry. Good. There you go. I'll put you back.
And we got the having party coming on. Block at 840,000 in El Salvador. We want you to be there. Come on down. Bring your girl or whoever you're coming with and enjoy the having with us, the Meme Factory, Max and Stacy are gonna be there, and it's just gonna be a blast. There's gonna be a bunch of other people down there too.
Is
So
President
come on
Bukele
down.
going to be there?
Who?
President Bukele?
Just say yes, Sean.
He's coming. He's coming. He doesn't know it yet, but he'll be there.
Not to worry. Macro condition. The stars are aligning. My astrology fibers are tingling. I don't do astrology at all.
Nice.
That by the time, and
But
Yellow,
something's
back me up on
tingling.
this. By
Yeah.
the time the next halving comes around, the Bitcoin bull market will have already commenced.
Yeah,
Yellow,
yeah.
do you agree with me on this?
Little green steps are starting from now. So, yeah.
This is beautiful.
Bitcoin will be at 58K by the next halving.
Your prophecy was correct within a week, Yellow, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was.
And-
Yep.
I can't remember what show I was on, but somebody asked. I was on BTC Sessions. and
BTC
somebody
sessions.
asked me-
And Rusty asked you. Yeah.
Yes, about Yellow's prophecy, and I vouched for you. So I talked about the Bitcoin layers macro framework being risk, rates, cross asset correlations, price study, commodities, economic data. We're adding Yellow to the list.
And Yellow Puppet.
I'm adding Yellow to my
Yeah,
Bloomberg terminal.
Excellent.
Perfect.
All right,
Also-
Joe.
also-
We are way past the time I'm comfortable having this thing run. So, if you could tell everybody where they can find you, they can also check the show notes for your Twitter handle and your Substack. But tell them anyway.
Absolutely. Well, thanks guys so much for having me. You could find me on Twitter, just at Joe Consorti, minus the S and the PH that you see up here on screen. Although I do love my full Italian name of Joseph Consorti,
So it's
at Joe
Consorti?
Consorti.
Joe Canori.
And yes, that's right. And on Substack at thebitcoinlayer.com. Go to thebitcoinlayer.com. You can find our YouTube channel and our Substack as well. We're a premium markets research provider covering Bitcoin through a global macro lens. Like I said earlier on the show, in case you weren't here, we try to do that in a very accessible way, in a very high signal,
You gotta talk faster. They're leaving. Talk faster. Gotta talk
in a very
faster.
high signal way. So go to thebitcoinlayer.com, subscribe, get all the markets information that you need. And once again, thanks guys for letting me on the show. It's a good time.
I was fucking with you. They're still here.
Don't let Greg
Oh,
do
come
that
on.
to you,
I
Joe.
turned it on
Don't let
2
Greg
times
do that
speed
to
for you, Greg. It's okay.
And that's why we mute him.
Thanks for coming on, Joe. I had a blast. Hope everybody else did too.
Thanks, Joe.
Good night.
Yeah, well done, man. Keep